She didn't even notice the dust at first. Not the way it swirled against the convoy's boots, not the way it carried the smell of diesel, cordite, and blood. What she noticed, what froze her hands, was the weight of the rifle pressed into her palms. It wasn't hers. It came to her jammed, heavy, silent. A dead thing. And the corporal who shoved it into her hands whispered just 3 words before disappearing back into the smoke. "You'll know how." But why her? Why, out of all of them, did he choose her? The rifle was an M82, longer than her arms, heavier than her chest could bear in a single breath. A weapon built for distance, for precision, for someone who believed they had the patience to line up a single shot instead of emptying magazines in a blur of panic. She had never asked for it. She had never wanted to carry something that could tear through men, metal, even walls. But now, the weapon was hers, jammed, useless, waiting. She crouched in the dirt, the sound of gunfire clattering against and for a split second she let the fear bleed through. Her heartbeat was louder than the shots, louder than the screams. She wanted to shout for someone else, for anyone else, but no one was listening. No one even saw her. That was the first time she realized she was invisible. Not to the enemy. They knew well enough that her uniform marked her as a target, but to her own. She had walked through the briefing room that morning, helmet under her arm, notes memorized, posture straight. Not one officer had looked her way. Not one soldier had spoken her name. She wasn't even sure they remembered it. And maybe that was easier. To them, she was just another set of boots, another helmet in formation. But the truth was different. The truth was heavy. The truth was carried in silence, like the M82 in her lap. Because she had done this before. But no one here knew. She gritted her teeth, pressing her thumb against the receiver, clearing the jam with practiced force. The bolt slid forward and the rifle breathed again, alive. Her hands shouldn't have known what to do. She shouldn't have had the muscle memory. She shouldn't have known the sound the weapon made when it was angry, or the way the scope could catch the sun if you didn't angle your cheek right. But she knew. And when she exhaled, pressing the rifle into her shoulder, the world narrowed into one line, one distance, one fragile silhouette moving through the haze. The first shot split the air. It was clean, cold, absolute. No one cheered. No one turned. Her shot was swallowed by the chaos, by the shouting, by the scrambling of boots in dust. And maybe that was better. She wasn't ready for them to look at her. Not yet. Because they didn't know. They didn't know about the medal. It wasn't pinned to her chest. It wasn't worn in ceremony, displayed in glass, or hidden in a drawer back home. It was here in her pack, scratched and dulled by sand and time, etched with numbers no one believed. 305, confirmed. She had once held it in her hands, staring at the engraving as if it belonged to someone else, as if it was a cruel mistake. 305. She didn't remember their faces. Not all of them, only fragments, a scarf whipped by wind, a hand clutching a rifle, a pair of eyes just before the shot. They weren't ghosts, not yet, but they followed. They always followed. And now she was here again, invisible to everyone but the weapon in her hands. The corporal reappeared through the haze, crouched low, voice tight. "You clear it." She nodded once, silent. He didn't ask how. Didn't ask why her hands worked the bolt like second nature, why her cheek settled against the scope without hesitation. He didn't see the flicker of recognition in her eyes, the way her chest tightened with something more than fear. He only clapped her shoulder, quick, fleeting, and moved on. And she was left there, still kneeling in the dirt, still staring through glass at the world beyond The trigger was steady under her finger. But inside, nothing was steady at all. She hadn't wanted this again. She had promised herself that much. She had told herself she would serve, yes, but not in that way. She had told herself she could stand with them, march with them, without becoming that again. A shadow, a ghost maker, the girl with 305 names carved into her silence. But war doesn't honor promises. She remembered the first time she pulled the trigger on the M82. Different desert, different year. She had been younger then, almost a child, though they had called her something else. Prodigy, natural, gifted. She had hated those words. She didn't feel gifted. She felt stolen. Each shot took something from her. Not just from them, but from her. And yet here she was. The rifle lay against her shoulder, as if it had never left. Boots thundered around her, voices cracked orders, hands pulled stretchers through the smoke. She wanted to be one of them, just one of them. Carrying weight, sweating under armor not set apart by glass and distance and silence. But the war had found her again. It always did. Her eyes narrowed. Another silhouette, higher on the ridge, moving with too much purpose. She adjusted, slow, careful, the way her instructors had once drilled into her. She hated that the movements came back so easily, that the breath left her lungs in perfect rhythm, that her finger found the break point on the trigger without hesitation. She fired again. The ridge grew still. And once more, no one noticed. She lowered the weapon, a strange relief washing through her chest. Relief, not pride, because pride had long ago been buried with the first faces she couldn't remember. What remained now was something heavier, quieter. The corporal's voice rose through the noise, shouting for cover, for movement, for someone to push forward. She stood slowly, dust clinging to her knees, and felt the metal inside her pack shift against her spine. She didn't need to touch it to know it was there. She didn't need to read the number again. It was etched into her, deeper than steel. She moved forward, weapon steady, steps careful. She wasn't sure who she was anymore, the invisible soldier or the ghost maker. Maybe both, maybe neither. But she walked. And with each step, a question burned in her chest, louder than the gunfire, sharper than the dust in her lungs. How many more? Why was the captain watching her now? She had walked into the debriefing tent, still dusted with smoke, helmet tucked under her arm, rifle slung awkwardly against her back. Men and women sat around the folding table, maps spread, radios buzzing, words sharp and clipped. She expected to vanish into the background, as always. But for the first time, eyes found her. Not all of them, just his. The captain didn't say a word, didn't nod, didn't blink, just watched. Long enough for her chest to tighten, long enough for her to wish the earth would swallow her, because she knew what he was seeing even if he didn't understand it. He was seeing the shot, the silence after, the way the ridge had grown still, too still, as if one bullet had quieted an entire direction of fire. She sank into the metal chair at the edge of the table, careful to make no noise. She wanted to fold into herself, to become invisible again. But invisibility had slipped through her fingers the second she pulled the trigger. The corporal, the same one who had handed her the jammed M82, leaned against the wall behind her, arms crossed. He didn't speak either, but there was something in his posture, something that told her he hadn't forgotten the way she handled the weapon, that he wasn't going to forget. The captain dragged his finger across the map, barking orders in a voice that carried exhaustion more than authority. He talked about the ridge, about pushing east, about cutting supply routes. She only half listened, because her pulse was still beating in her throat, because her hands still remembered the weight of the trigger. Then his eyes returned to her. "You," he said. The room went silent. Heads turned, some with curiosity, some with irritation. She wished he had pointed to anyone else, anyone at all. But no, his hand lifted, finger steady, aimed at her like the scope she couldn't put down. "You're the one who took the ridge." Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She shook her head quickly, almost desperately. "No, sir, that wasn't." The corporal interrupted. "It was her." And just like that, her secret cracked. The captain studied her, slow, deliberate. His gaze wasn't impressed, wasn't even curious. It was calculating, measuring. He had seen soldiers like her before, or at least thought he had. Soldiers who carried silence differently. Soldiers who didn't flinch when they should have. He didn't press further. Not yet. He simply returned to the map, voice firm again, as if nothing had shifted. But the room wasn't the same anymore. She felt the weight of stairs, the tightening of air, the shift of how they saw her, no longer invisible, no longer just another helmet. When the meeting broke, she slipped out quickly, lungs aching as if she had been holding her breath the entire time. Outside, the air was no cleaner, no softer. Dust still lingered, the sky still burned orange with the remnants of smoke. But at least out here, she was free from their eyes. Until the corporal followed. "You didn't tell them," he said. His voice wasn't accusing, just matter of fact. She turned, clutching her helmet. "Tell them what?" He tilted his head slightly, a humorless half-smile tugging at his lip. "Don't play. I saw the way you cleared that jam, saw the way you lined up those shots. That wasn't luck. That wasn't guessing. That was muscle memory." Her chest clenched. She wanted to deny it, to laugh, to shake her head, but his eyes held steady, waiting. So instead she whispered, "I didn't want this." The corporal didn't respond. Not at first. He just studied her as if weighing whether to press further. Finally, he sighed. "War doesn't care what we want." And he left her standing there, with nothing but the hum of generators and the distant thud of artillery to answer her silence. That night she sat on her bunk, knees pulled tight, staring at the small object she had taken from her pack. The metal. The etching caught the dim light. 305. 305 lives that had ended with her finger. She hated the coldness of the metal, hated how light it felt compared to the weight it carried inside her. She closed her eyes, pressing it into her palm until the edge bit her skin. She remembered the first time someone handed it to her. The ceremony was small, quiet, because metals like this weren't meant to be paraded. They were meant to be whispered about, passed in shadows, recognized by those who understood what the numbers meant. The officer who gave it to her hadn't smiled, hadn't congratulated her. He had simply said, "This is yours. You earned it. You'll carry it whether you want to or not." She had wanted to throw it away that very night, but she didn't, because part of her knew she could never throw away what it represented. Now, staring at it again, she felt the old ache return. Not pride, never pride, something closer to shame, but deeper still, something else. A question she couldn't silence. Had she saved more lives than she ended? That was the question that gnawed at her in the dark, the question that left her sleepless. The next morning, orders came fast. Push east, secure the supply routes. She marched with the unit, helmet down, rifle slung. Not the M82, at least not yet. She carried the standard issue, her fingers restless, uneasy without the familiar weight of glass and steel. She told herself it was better this way, better to blend in. But war doesn't let ghosts hide. The ambush came before noon. Gunfire erupted from the rocks above, sharp, sudden, pinning them against the sand. She dropped, heart pounding, dirt biting into her cheek. The captain's voice roared through the chaos, ordering flanks, shouting positions. But the ridge loomed high, higher than rifles could reach. And then she saw it. The corporal scrambling in the dirt, dragging the long case toward her. Her chest locked. He slid the M82 at her feet, breathless, eyes fierce. "We need it. We need you." She shook her head, panic twisting through her ribs. "No, I can't, not again." "You already did," he snapped. The rifle lay between them, silent, waiting. The battle raged around, shouts and fire cutting the air. Her hands trembled. She could walk away. She could leave it closed, leave it untouched. Pretend she was just another soldier pinned down in the dust. But then she saw them. Her brothers and sisters pinned behind rocks, exposed, waiting for someone, anyone, to cut the fire raining down. Her throat tightened, and she reached. The case cracked open. The weapon gleamed, heavy, familiar, too familiar. She lifted it, hands steady even as her heart raced. Slid into position, scope pressed against her eye. The world shrank again down to a single line, a single breath. She fired. The ridge stilled. Boots moved, voices rose, the squad surged forward. She stayed behind, chest heaving, the metal burning in her pack. She hadn't wanted this, but the war wanted her. And it wasn't letting go. Why did the captain call her into his tent at night? The air outside was still alive with the hum of generators, the distant crack of small arms echoing off barren hills. She had just set her helmet down when a runner appeared at the flap, eyes wide, saying nothing more than, "He wants you." Her gut twisted. Orders were orders, but the timing, the darkness, felt different. She stepped into the tent, ducking low, eyes adjusting to the lamplight. Maps lay strewn across the table. A radio hissed in the corner. The captain stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He didn't turn. For a moment she thought maybe he wouldn't speak. Maybe he would leave her there in silence, the way most did. But then his voice broke the stillness. "You lied to me." Her throat tightened. "Sir." He turned now, his gaze sharp, unflinching. "I checked your file." Her chest burned. She wanted to step back, to vanish. But the flap behind her felt miles away. "Your record says nothing about long-range qualification," he continued. "Nothing about sniper school. Nothing that explains how you cleared that ridge, or the one after. So tell me, soldier, who taught you to shoot like that?" The air grew heavier with every second. She wanted to say nothing, to shrug, to pretend it didn't matter. But his stare demanded something. Still, her voice came out quiet, almost a whisper. "No one taught me, sir." The captain's jaw tightened. "Don't lie." She looked down, nails pressing into her palms. The truth tasted bitter, sharp. It was before, another unit, another place. The captain waited, silent, giving her the space to continue. But her throat closed. She couldn't say it. Couldn't tell him about the medal tucked away, about the 305 etched into metal and memory. Not yet. When he finally spoke, his tone was lower, almost softer. "You don't want them to know, do you?" Her eyes snapped up. He wasn't angry. He wasn't curious. He was reflective, as if he understood something about hiding, about carrying weight no one else could see. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He nodded once, firm, decisive. "Fine, keep your secret. But understand this, when I call for you, it won't be because I want a ghost story. It'll be because men and women I command will die without your rifle." Her lungs felt heavy, her voice small. "Yes, sir." "Dismissed." She stepped back into the night, the cool air cutting against her skin. For a moment she stood frozen, staring at the stars above the desert. Beautiful, distant, untouched. She wondered if they judged her too. Back at her bunk she found the corporal waiting, arms crossed, leaning on the frame like he had nowhere better to be. His eyes studied her face. What did he want? She shook her head, brushing past. "Nothing." But he didn't move. His voice followed her, quiet, cutting. "You can't keep this locked forever." She froze mid-step, turned, anger breaking through the silence she usually carried. "You think I want this? You think I asked for this rifle, this weight? You think I enjoy carrying every face I've ever put into the dirt?" The corporal didn't flinch, didn't back down. He only tilted his head, voice steady. "Then why are you still here?" The question cut deeper than any accusation. She wanted to scream at him, tell him she didn't have a choice, that the war had dragged her in long before she understood what it meant, that she had been born into it, shaped by it, broken by it, that walking away wasn't an option because ghosts follow. Instead, her voice cracked, "Because someone has to be." For the first time, the corporal's face softened. Not pity, he wasn't the type, but something close to understanding. He gave a single nod, then walked off, leaving her with the echo of her own words. That night sleep didn't come. She lay staring at the medal in her hand, the numbers glowing faintly in lamplight. 305. She thought of the captain's eyes, the corporal's question, the silence that followed every shot. She thought of the faces she couldn't remember and the few she could never forget. At dawn, orders came again. A convoy needed escort through hostile territory. Standard, routine. Nothing routine ever stayed that way. She marched with them, the sun heavy, the horizon shimmering with heat. The M82 rode strapped to her back this time, heavy but inevitable. She felt its weight with every step, like a reminder. Hours passed before the first explosion ripped through the convoy. The ground shook, fire swallowed the lead truck, shouts erupted. She dropped low, weapon sliding free, eyes scanning the ridges. The enemy wasn't close, they never were. She found them in the scope, faint figures blending into rocks, patient. She almost their patience. Almost. Her breath slowed, the shot broke, one figure fell. She shifted, fired again. The convoy moved, engines roaring, tires skidding through dirt. She stayed focused, pulse steady, every target reduced to a shadow through glass. But then something caught her. Not the enemy, not the chaos. A child. Not on the ridge, not armed, standing in the dust off the road, eyes wide, frozen as the trucks roared past. Her finger tightened on the trigger, instinct screaming that she couldn't afford distraction, but her eyes stayed locked on his. He was younger than she had been when she first held this rifle. Her breath caught. She lowered the scope. The convoy pushed on, the ridges cleared, the trucks rolled to safety. But her chest didn't. Her lungs refused to steady. The image of the boy stayed carved behind her eyes, silent, unmoving. Back at camp, the captain gave orders, the unit dispersed, and no one asked about the shot count. No one but the corporal, who found her again by the edge of the wire. "You hesitated," he said simply. She swallowed hard, voice rough. "There was a kid." The corporal nodded once, eyes steady, and her voice cracked, "and he looked like me." Silence stretched. The desert wind carried sand across their boots. The corporal didn't press, didn't judge. He simply stood beside her, quiet, as if the weight in her chest didn't need words. For the first time, she was grateful. Because she didn't need another question. She needed space to breathe. But even then, she knew the war wouldn't let her. Not for long. Why was her finger trembling now, when it had never trembled before? The rifle lay heavy against her shoulder, the scope steady, the target clear. Everything should have been automatic: breath, aim, squeeze. She had done it hundreds of times, more times than she could remember. But now, with her eye locked on a silhouette moving across the ridge, her body refused to obey. The hesitation was seconds long, nothing more, but in war, seconds kill. The shot came late. By the time the bullet cracked through the air, the silhouette had already fired. Down below, the unit scrambled for cover. One soldier hit, blood staining the dirt. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't the first time someone had fallen near her. It wasn't the first time she had seen blood soaking into sand. But this time was different, because she knew, with sickening certainty, that her hesitation had bought that shot. Her delay had cost him. When the firefight ended, when the dust settled, the wounded were dragged back to camp. She followed in silence, her weapon strapped against her back, her throat burning with words she couldn't say. That night, the captain's summons came again. Inside the lamplit tent, his expression was carved from stone. "One of mine is bleeding because you hesitated." Her chest constricted. "Sir, He cut her off, voice sharp. "Don't lie to me, you don't miss. I've seen the way you shoot. That wasn't wind, that wasn't chance, that was you." She looked down, nails biting into her palms. She wanted to explain, wanted to tell him about the boy in the dust, about the faces that blurred together, about how every pull of the trigger felt heavier than the last. But explanations didn't matter here, not when soldiers were dying. Finally her voice broke, small, brittle. "It was a child, yesterday on the road." The captain studied her in silence. His jaw clenched, but his eyes softened just enough to reveal something beneath the steel. Not pity, not sympathy, just the weary recognition of a man who had carried his own ghosts. He leaned closer, voice low, deliberate. "Out here, hesitation kills. Doesn't matter why, doesn't matter what you see. You think you're saving yourself, but you're condemning them. Don't forget that." Her chest ached, she nodded once, "Yes, sir." But when she left the tent, the words didn't leave her. Hesitation kills. The next morning, the corporal found her cleaning the rifle alone. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching, arms crossed as always. She felt his eyes but didn't look up. "You're different," he finally said. Her hands stilled on the cloth. "What do you mean?" He tilted his head slightly. "Most shooters I've known, they detach. They make themselves machines, pull the trigger, move on. You carry every shot." Her throat tightened. "Maybe I'm not built for this." His response came without hesitation. "No, you're built for it, that's the problem." She hated that his words cut so close to truth. She hated even more that part of her believed him. Later that day, they were sent out again. Different valley, different ridges, the kind of terrain where the enemy could vanish and reappear like ghosts themselves. She marched with the squad, every step dragging the weight of the metal in her pack. She didn't touch it, but she felt it there, pressing against her spine, a constant reminder of what she had been. When the ambush came, it was brutal, fire from three sides. The squad scattered into cover, shouting, firing blindly. She dropped low, the M82 sliding into her hands almost without thought. She lined the scope, breath slow, finger pressing. One shot. Two. Three. The ridge cracked with silence after each. The squad began to push, their fire more confident now, their shouts less frantic. She should have felt relief, but all she felt was the hollow echo that followed every trigger pull. Then out of the corner of her scope she saw movement. A figure crawling along the rocks, not firing, not even holding a weapon. She shifted, eyes narrowing. The shape was small, too small. Her chest froze. A boy again. Her breath faltered. The world spun narrow, suffocating. She wanted to lower the rifle, wanted to look away. But then the captain's voice echoed in her skull. Hesitation kills. Her finger hovered, trembling. Before she could decide, the corporal's voice cut through the chaos, shouting from behind cover. "Target your left, weapon spotted." Her eyes snapped back through the scope. Another silhouette further off, rifle raised, lined directly at the squad. No time, no room for doubt. She fired. The hostile fell, the squad surged. The valley grew quiet again. Her lungs burned as if she had run miles. She lowered the rifle, chest heaving, hands shaking. The boy was gone, vanished into the rocks, or maybe never there at all. She couldn't tell anymore. Back at camp, no one questioned her. No one asked how many shots, how many fell. To them, she was just a weapon that had worked when they needed it. Nothing more, nothing less. But that night, alone in her bunk, she opened her pack and pulled out the medal. Ran her fingers across the engraving. 305. She whispered the number like a curse. The corporal's words haunted her. "You're built for it, that's the problem." She wondered if he was right. And if he was, what did that make her? The next day, the captain didn't call her in. No lectures, no accusations, no orders meant just for her. Instead, he avoided her entirely. And somehow, that was worse. Because if he wasn't questioning her, if he wasn't pressing, then it meant he had already decided who she was. A tool, a weapon, a shadow to aim at ridges until nothing moved. And maybe he was right too. That night she sat alone at the wire, watching the horizon burn orange under a fatting sun. The corporal found her there as if he always knew where she'd be. He didn't speak at first, just sat down beside her, staring at the same horizon. Finally he asked, "Do you ever wonder if it matters, all the shots, all the names, if it actually changes anything?" She swallowed hard, voice quiet, "Every day." He nodded, slow, thoughtful, "Me too." The silence stretched between them, heavy but not unbearable. For once she didn't feel judged, didn't feel alone. Just two soldiers staring into the same endless desert, both asking questions with no answers. But deep down, she knew one thing with certainty. The war wasn't done with her, not yet. Why was the corporal holding her pack? She had returned from patrol, dust caked into her uniform, her arms aching from the rifle's weight, only to find him sitting on her bunk, the canvas bag in his hands. He didn't look up at first. He just ran his thumb along the zipper, slow, deliberate, as if testing how far he could push before she broke. Her chest tightened. "Put it down." He glanced up, eyes steady, unreadable. "I found it while moving gear." Her voice sharpened. "You had no right." "Maybe not," he said, unzipping the bag halfway. The metallic clink echoed too loudly in the cramped barracks. He reached in, pulled it out, and held it to the dim light. The metal, the numbers, the secret. 305. He studied it without expression, though his jaw clenched once, almost imperceptibly. Then his eyes lifted to hers. "This is real." Her throat locked. Words clawed inside her chest, but none came out. He turned the metal slowly in his fingers, the engraved numbers catching the lantern glow. "You've been hiding this the whole time." Her voice finally cracked through, low, desperate. "Because it doesn't belong to me." The corporal frowned. "Your name on the back." "I didn't ask for it." The words burst from her before she could stop them. Heads turned from nearby bunks, soldiers watching, whispering, though no one dared speak. She reached for it, but he pulled his hand back, not in mockery but in hesitation. His voice dropped, quieter but heavier. 305, you understand what this means." Her chest heaved. "It means I can't sleep. It means I see faces I don't want to remember. It means I can't put this rifle down without feeling the weight of every trigger I ever pulled." For a moment silence held them. The metal gleamed between them like a wound. Then slowly he extended it back. She snatched it, shoved it deep into her pack, and zipped it shut with shaking hands. The corporal leaned closer, his voice like gravel. "Secrets don't stay buried out here. You think you're invisible, but people are watching, especially him." Her blood ran cold. "The captain." The corporal nodded once. That night she couldn't sleep. Every creak of canvas, every murmur of voices outside, every distant crack of gunfire twisted her nerves. She kept her pack pressed against her chest like a shield, the metal burning inside. She thought about moving it, hiding it somewhere else, burying it in sand. But the thought of leaving it behind terrified her more than carrying it. Because the metal wasn't just metal, it was proof. Proof of everything she wanted to forget. By dawn, she looked hollow, dark circles beneath her eyes, her hands trembling as she laced her boots. The captain's voice cut across the yard, calling the unit to briefing. She joined them, helmet under her arm, keeping her gaze down. But when she stepped inside the tent, she felt it immediately, his eyes. He was watching her. The map stretched across the table showed supply lines, ambush points they'd bled for. His finger traced routes, his voice steady, clipped. But every pause in his words felt like it landed on her. Every glance cut sharper than orders. Finally, when the briefing ended and soldiers began filing out, his voice stopped her. "You stay." Her stomach dropped. The tent emptied until only they remained. The captain leaned against the table, arms folded, expression unreadable. "You've been carrying something. I don't like mysteries in my unit." She froze. Every instinct screamed to deny it, to shrug, to feign ignorance, to bury the truth deeper. But the weight of the metal in her pack pressed against her spine like it wanted to speak for her. The captain stepped closer, voice low, steady. "You don't hesitate like a recruit. You don't fire like someone untrained. And yesterday, when I saw your eyes after the ridge cleared, that wasn't relief. That was memory, old memory." Her throat tightened. "Sir, with respect." "Respect," he cut in sharply, "is earned. And right now I don't know who I'm commanding." The silence stretched, unbearable. Finally her voice cracked. "I didn't want this life." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. She pressed on, each word trembling. "They gave me a weapon before I was ready to understand what it meant. They put me on ridges before I knew the cost. And when it was over, they gave me a medal I never wanted." The captain's jaw tensed. He didn't ask for details, didn't need them. He had seen enough wars, enough soldiers, to understand the outline even without the specifics. His silence was heavier than any interrogation. Finally he spoke, "How many?" Her eyes burned. She whispered, 305. For the first time his face changed. Not shock, not disbelief, something else. A weight, a sorrow, as if the number itself pressed on him too. He looked down, pressing his hands against the table. When he raised his eyes again, his voice was quiet, almost reflective. "You carry that alone." She nodded once. He studied her for a long moment. Then he straightened, his tone hardening again. "You want to keep it buried, fine. But understand this, you can't outrun who you are. And the longer you try, the more it will eat you alive." Her chest ached, but she forced herself to answer, "Yes, sir." Dismissed. She walked out into the sunlight, blinking against the harsh glare, her pack heavier than ever. The corporal was waiting by the wire as if he knew. He didn't ask what was said. He didn't have to. Instead, he asked something else, something quieter. "Do you regret it?" She stopped cold, her breath catching. She thought of the medal, of the boy in the dust, of the soldier bleeding because her finger trembled, of all the faces she couldn't remember and the few she would never forget. Her answer came out like sand, dry and broken, every day. The corporal didn't nod, didn't speak. He just stood beside her, watching the horizon as if it might carry answers neither of them would ever find. That night, for the first time in years, she pulled the medal from her pack and set it on the ground beside her bunk. She stared at it for hours, as if daring it to vanish, daring herself to leave it behind. But when dawn came, it was still there. And she knew she would pick it up again. Because no matter how much she hated it, the war wasn't done with her. Not yet. Why did the captain place the medal on the map? The morning sun bled through the canvas walls of the tent, casting long shadows across the briefing table. Soldiers filled the room, voices hushed, boots scraping. She had taken her usual place near the edge, helmet resting on her knee, eyes down. But when the captain spread the map open, his hand slid something onto it. Metal scratched, etched. Her chest seized. The metal. Every eye in the tent turned. Conversations died in their throats. Soldiers stared at the small circle of steel as though it carried more weight than the rifles slung across their backs. The captain's voice cut through the silence, sharp but calm. "One of you has been carrying this, quietly, for a long time." She couldn't breathe. The corporal's eyes flicked to her, quick, subtle, protective, but it was too late. The silence was already pointing at her, heavier than any finger. The captain let the pause stretch, deliberate. Then he placed his palm flat on the medal. "I don't care who it belongs to. What I care about is this. Whoever earned it understands distance, patience, precision. And right now, that's what's keeping this unit alive." Murmurs rippled, some with respect, some with suspicion. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the canvas floor, but instead the captain's eyes found hers. He didn't say her name, didn't need to. The message was clear: this is yours and you can't run from it anymore. After the briefing, she grabbed her pack and stormed outside, her pulse hammering. She wanted to shout at him, demand why he had put it on display, why he had stripped her invisibility. But before she could reach the flap, the corporal caught her arm. "Don't," he whispered. Her voice broke. He had no right. The corporal's grip tightened steady. "He gave you no choice, that's different." She yanked free, walking off toward the wire, away from the eyes that followed her now. Every stare felt heavier than the metal itself. Whispers trailed her, ghost stories forming in real time. Later that day, orders came. A forward outpost under siege. Supply lines cut. High ground contested. It wasn't optional, it was survival. She marched with the squad, helmet low, rifle slung, the M82 carried like an accusation across her back. Hours into the push, the valley narrowed. The cliffs loomed, jagged and unforgiving. The first shots cracked overhead, echoing like thunder. Soldiers dove for cover, sand spraying under fire. She dropped behind a boulder, unzipping the long case with shaking hands. The weapon slid free, heavy, inevitable. Her cheek pressed against the scope. The world narrowed again. Targets flickered in the glass, shadows darting between rocks, rifles spitting fire. She lined her breath, squeezed. One fell. Another shifted, exposed, second shot dropped him. The squad pushed forward under her cover, boots pounding through dirt. Voices shouted, not in panic this time, but with urgency, with trust. They were relying on her, depending on her. And that terrified her more than the enemy. She kept firing, each pull of the trigger steady, each echo louder inside than outside. And with every shot, the memory of the boy in the dust returned, sharper, harder to silence. His eyes, his stillness. But this time there was no boy, no hesitation, only the ridge, only the rifle. When the last echo died, the cliffs grew quiet, too quiet. She lowered the weapon, sweat burning down her temple, her chest heaving. Around her, the squad began to move again, shouting for stretchers, clearing positions. She sat frozen, staring through the scope long after the fight was over. Because she hadn't just killed shadows, she had counted. Her finger had tallied each shot, each fall. She knew the number now, even if no one else did. 10. 10 more names she would never know, faces she would never remember, etched silently into her chest alongside the 305. That night the captain sought her out, not in front of the others, not with rank and authority, just him, standing by the edge of camp, his voice low. "You kept them alive today." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "I added 10 more." The captain's expression tightened. He didn't argue, didn't try to soften it. Instead, he said, "Do you think you were the only one who did?" He gestured toward the camp, where medics worked under lanterns, where soldiers cleaned rifles with shaking hands. "Every one of them added names today. The only difference is you keep count." Her throat burned. She wanted to scream, to ask him if he knew what it meant to carry that count, to wake with it, to dream with it. But she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she whispered, "What happens when the count breaks me?" The captain's gaze held hers, steady, quiet. "Then we'll carry you the way you've carried us." She turned away, tears burning hot but silent, because she didn't believe him, not yet. The corporal found her later, sitting alone by the wire, the medal in her hands. He sat beside her without a word. For a long time neither spoke. The desert wind moved around them, carrying the scent of smoke and dust. Finally she asked, "Do you believe him?" The corporal glanced at her. "Who?" "The captain, when he says they'll carry me." The corporal didn't answer right away. He stared at the horizon, jaw tight, as if the question was heavier than the medal she held. Finally, he said, "I believe this. No one comes out clean. Not him. Not me. Not you. The only thing that matters is whether you let the dirt bury you or whether you keep moving through it." She looked down at the medal, the numbers catching the faint moonlight. 315 now, though the engraving would never change. Her voice cracked, "And if I can't keep moving?" The corporal's reply was quiet, almost too soft to hear. "Then I'll carry you." For the first time in months, maybe years, she closed her eyes and let someone else's words hold the weight. But deep inside, she knew the war wasn't finished with her. It was circling closer, waiting for the moment she could no longer move at all. Why was the night so quiet before it shattered? The desert stretched under a moonless sky, black and endless, the kind of silence that presses against the chest like a weight. They had marched for hours, boots crunching in rhythm, radios whispering static. Every soldier knew what waited ahead, an enemy stronghold buried into the rocks, fortified, relentless. She carried the M82 across her back, the strap digging into her shoulder like it belonged there. The metal was in her pack, cold and heavy, though she hadn't touched it since the captain laid it on the map. She didn't need to. The numbers were etched deeper than steel, carved into her bones. When the first flash lit the horizon, the night exploded. Mortars screamed down, ripping the ground, tossing dirt and bodies into the air. Gunfire spat from the cliffs, cutting across the valley. Soldiers dove, shouting, firing blindly into the black. She hit the dirt, her cheeks stinging against gravel. The case snapped open, her hands pulling the rifle free without thought. The scope caught muzzle flashes on the ridge. Shadows, figures, movement. Her breath slowed, the world shrank. 1. She fired. 2. 3. The squad pushed forward, hugging cover, voices ragged but alive. She stayed low, every shot buying them inches of ground. But the enemy didn't stop. They kept coming, pouring fire into the valley, their shouts echoing like ghosts through the night. Her finger never left the trigger. Her cheek never left the stock. Each target dropped, each shadow vanished, but still they came. Her chest tightened with every breath, the number in her head ticking upward. 20. 30. She lost count in the haze of fire and recoil. The captain's voice cut through the radio, strained but steady. We push now or we don't push at all. The squad surged forward. She stayed back, covering, her scope tracing arcs of fire. She barely noticed the corporal drop beside her, breath ragged, rifle empty. "You with me?" he shouted over the chaos. Her voice was calm, too calm. "I'm here." He glanced at her face, the stillness in her eyes, and for a moment his own expression cracked. He had seen soldiers unravel before. He knew the look, but there was no time to argue. "Then keep them alive." She did, shot after shot, her body moving on instinct, her mind hollowing with each trigger pull. She wasn't counting anymore. She couldn't. The numbers blurred, dissolving into one endless, merciless tally. But then it happened. A figure appeared in her scope, close, too close, moving fast with a rifle raised. She shifted, lined up, fired. The body dropped, rolling into the dirt. The scope lingered. Her breath caught. Not a fighter, not a man hardened by war. A girl, younger than she had been when it all started. Her hands trembled, her stomach lurched. The rifle slid from her shoulder as if it had burned her. She pressed her palms into the dirt, bile rising, her vision tunneling. The corporal grabbed her arm. "Don't look, move." But she couldn't move. The image burned into her skull, searing through every layer of denial she had built. She had told herself she was a weapon against soldiers, against threats. But now that line was gone, shattered. The captain's voice roared through the radio again. "We need fire on the ridge, now." Her hands refused, her chest locked. For the first time since she had picked up the M82, she couldn't bring it to her shoulder, couldn't look through the scope, couldn't fire. The corporal shook her, his own voice desperate now. "If you stop, they all die. Do you hear me?" She stared at him, eyes wet, voice broken. She was just a child. The corporal's jaw clenched. He didn't argue, didn't say the words she expected, words like collateral, necessity, survival. He only met her gaze and whispered, "So were you." The world seemed to split open inside her chest. Shouts echoed, fire rained, the squad screamed for cover. And finally, through the blur of tears, she lifted the rifle again. Not because she wanted to, not because she believed, but because she couldn't let the others fall. Her shots rang out once more, steady, merciless. The ridge cracked and stilled. The valley fell silent, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the rasp of labored breaths. When dawn bled across the desert, the stronghold was theirs. But the victory felt hollow, emptied of triumph. She sat on the ridge, the rifle across her knees, her eyes locked on the dirt where the girl had fallen. The corporal sat beside her, silent, his presence steady even when words failed. He didn't try to comfort her, didn't tell her it would be all right. He knew it wouldn't. The captain approached, boots crunching in the dust, his face drawn with exhaustion. He looked at her, then at the rifle, then at the ground where her eyes lingered. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. Instead, he said quietly, Sometimes survival doesn't give us choices, only consequences. Her voice cracked raw. Then what am I surviving for? The captain didn't answer. He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm, steady, but heavy, and walked away. The corporal remained, staring out at the horizon. After a long silence, he said, "You asked me once if it matters. All the shots, all the names." She turned to him, eyes hollow. "And?" He sighed, rubbing his hands together. "Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the war eats everything we give it. But I know this, you mattered to them today, to the ones who lived. You were the reason." Her throat burned, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. She wanted to believe him, needed to, but the image of the girl wouldn't leave. It followed her like every shadow, every ghost etched into her silence. That night she sat alone again, the medal in her hand. The engraving didn't change. It would never show the truth. Not 305, not 315, not however many it was now, not the child. She pressed it into her palm until the edge cut skin, blood staining the numbers. For the first time, she wondered if the medal wasn't proof of survival, but proof of her own undoing. Why did the corporal salute her before he left? The base was quiet after the mission, quieter than she had ever known it. Soldiers moved like shadows through camp, their voices hushed, their bodies heavy with exhaustion. The stronghold was taken, the lines pushed back, but victory felt like ash in their mouths. She sat by the wire again, rifle across her knees, the medal in her palm. Dried blood still traced the edge, her own mark cut into the steel. She had tried to scrub it clean, but it clung stubbornly, as if the medal wanted to remember even when she wanted to forget. The corporal approached slowly, boots crunching in the sand. He didn't speak at first. He just stood beside her, arms crossed, watching the horizon turn from black to bruised violet. Finally, he said, "Orders came down. I'm being moved to another unit." Her chest tightened. She looked up sharply. "When?" "Tomorrow." The word struck harder than she expected. He had been the only one who saw her for what she was, not just a weapon, not just a rumor, but something broken, fragile, human. And now he would be gone. She swallowed hard. "So that's it." He gave a faint, tired smile. "Out here it's always that's it, until the next fight." Her eyes dropped back to the medal, the numbers cutting into her palm. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he crouched, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "You think this defines you," he said, nodding toward the medal. "But it doesn't, not really. What defines you is that you still hate it, that you still feel every face, that you're not numb." Her throat burned. "It's killing me." He shook his head. "It's keeping you alive." The words lodged in her chest like another bullet she couldn't pull free. When dawn broke, the corporal stood with his pack slung, ready to move with the convoy. Soldiers gathered, some shaking hands, some offering quiet farewells. She stayed at the edge, watching, heart pounding. Then he turned, caught her eyes across the dust, and did something she never expected. He raised his hand in salute. Not the casual kind soldiers toss each other, not the empty gesture of protocol. It was sharp, deliberate, respectful, a salute meant for someone who had carried more than any rank could measure. Her chest clenched. She didn't return it. She couldn't. Her hand stayed frozen against the metal in her pack, but tears burned hot behind her eyes as he lowered his hand and climbed into the vehicle. And just like that, he was gone. The camp felt emptier without him, though it was never truly quiet. Orders came, patrols moved, radios buzzed. She followed routine, the rifle always near, the metal always pressing against her spine. Days blurred into nights, nights into days. But something had shifted. The captain called her into his tent one evening, maps spread, his eyes weary. He didn't lecture, didn't interrogate. He simply said, "I know what this war has taken from you, but I also know what it's given the rest of us. Without you, half this unit wouldn't be standing. Don't forget that." She didn't reply, couldn't. The words tangled in her chest, but she met his gaze, and for the first time she didn't look away. The weeks passed. Missions came and went. Some ended with silence, some with screams. Each time she carried the rifle, each time she carried the weight, and each time she told herself it might be the last. Until one evening, when the desert burned orange under the setting sun, she walked beyond the wire with the medal in her hand. She stood alone, staring at the numbers, the etching dulled but still sharp enough to cut. 305. The number would never grow, it would never shrink. It was frozen, a monument to everything she had tried to bury. She closed her eyes, hearing the corporal's voice. "It doesn't define you." She knelt, dug her hand into the sand, and pressed the metal deep into the earth. The grains swallowed it slowly, clinging to the edges, covering the steel until nothing remained but desert. Her breath shook, her chest ached, but for the first time in years she felt lighter, not free, not absolved, just lighter. When she returned to camp, the rifle was still waiting. The missions would still come. The ghosts would still follow, but the medal was gone. And maybe that was enough. That night she sat under the stars, their cold light stretching endlessly overhead. She thought of the corporal, of his words, of the salute she had never returned. She thought of the captain, of his steady hand on her shoulder. She thought of the boy in the dust, the girl on the ridge, the faces that would never leave. Her eyes closed, her breath steadied, and she realized something she had never dared to admit before. She wasn't carrying the weight because she was strong. She was carrying it because no one else could. And maybe that was her redemption. Not in the medal, not in the number, not in the rifle, but in the quiet truth that sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.